And we have a quorum present with Mr. O'Farrell and myself. I'd like to ask that item 4, 6, 7, 8, and 9 all go on consent without objection.
No objections.
And let's start with item number 1.
Item number 1, communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Larry Gross to the Board of Animal Services for the term ending June 30th, 2015.
And let's see, I'm now not seeing Mr. Gross. Did he step out of the room? Oh, sorry, my fault. Larry, if you'd like to join us up front. And while I think your involvement in housing and tenant issues is somewhat legendary in the city of Los Angeles, I think your interest in animals is probably not as well known, so I wonder if you could just give us a short history of your interest and involvement in animal issues.
Well, first, thank you for considering me for this important position, and thank you to Mayor Garcetti for the appointment. This is not only an honor, but a privilege, and it's a huge responsibility, one that I don't take lightly. My wife and I are very active in our community, working with Fix Nation, dealing with the stray feral cats in our neighborhood. We've worked with Hand and Paw to get rescued dogs into people's homes. I live in a multi-cat household that cats we rescued and from the neighborhood. They were strays, and so it's a very important issue to me. I mean, with the domestication of animals, we were tasked with a duty to be guardians and protectors of our animal companions. And the Animal Service Department and Board must really ensure this responsibility and ensure that it's met. We pledge to be a no-kill city, and while we've come a long way, we have a long way to go to make that a reality. If one animal that could be adopted is euthanized, then we're failing in that goal. And to reach this objective, we need to ensure that dogs and cats are both homeless and adopted, are spayed and neutered. In addition, we need to make it easy for people to adopt and to take care of their animals. The connection with my work as far as housing and tenants' rights, well, this is a city of renters with 62% of the residents tenants. So we really need to facilitate the adoption in rental units. That means seeking cooperation and understanding between tenants and landlords. And given my work with tenants in the past couple of decades and my ability to cooperatively work with the apartment association, I believe this is an area that I could make a contribution as a commissioner. I mean, this task is huge given the number of homeless, stray, and feral cats and dogs. Our only chance of success is a cooperative partnership that's inclusive of all the stakeholders, and that means that the Department of Animal Services must work together with council offices and other city departments and animal rescue and rights organizations and shelter staff and their unions, AFSCME, SEIU, and the laborers and the shelter volunteers, and clearly tenants, landlords, and homeowners. And we must keep the morale of our shelter workers very high, and we must ensure the involvement of the community. And by working together, I think we can meet our responsibility to the animals of the city, and that's what I'm committed to doing, and that's why I'm here today asking humbly for your support.
Thank you, and I should note that Mr. Fuentes has joined us, and any questions or comments from colleagues?
Hello, thank you for stepping up to the plate to serve on the commission, Mr. Gross. Just a question or a suggestion, depending on your answer. Have you read the Spay Neuter Task Force report that was published about 3 or 4 years ago?
I've read a lot of material, and I've been following the commission and listening to tapes. I haven't read that. I clearly need to.
Okay,
yes.
And we can provide that with you.
Absolutely.
It's just over about a 12-month period, some of the most active, most knowledgeable animal welfare advocates came together and produced a report with suggestions for policy implementation, and it was all about spay neuter and all about eliminating our kill rate. So I think that would be a really good guide for you going into the post.
Extremely helpful. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Mr. Fuentes, any questions or comments? Okay, we have a couple speakers from the public. First, James Johnson.
Good afternoon, council members. James Johnson, SEIU Local 721. While Mr. Gross certainly doesn't need our pitch for supporting this appointment, we simply wanted to say that we find it beautifully ironic that one of our city's most diligent advocates for the poor would also step up to take up the position to serve on the Animal Services Commission to protect those that can't speak for themselves. I think it's beautiful. On a personal note, and if you probably mean personal privilege, I've known Larry for almost 30 years. We've done a number of projects together through the years. He's one of the first people I met when I first became engaged in politics here in Los Angeles. He's somebody that not only I, but many of our members and the leadership of our organization respect highly, and we look forward to working with him as well as the other commissioners who will seek appointment in the next couple of weeks to move the Department of Animal Services forward. Our members stand ready to do that, and we know that we'll get it done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Phyllis Darty.
I'm Phyllis Doherty with Animal Issues Movement. Glad to see Mr. Gross coming on this commission, because the one thing that he can understand is that not everybody should have a pet. Not everybody can afford to have a pet. His tenants can hardly pay their rent, and very often a lot of the neglect with animals is in renters. We have to be cautious. We have to be sure that if they are dedicated to the pet, that they are going to make it a lifetime commitment, not just a temporary tryout. And I hope that he will ride along in the areas where people are struggling to pay their rent and see the condition of a lot of the animals. That doesn't mean that there aren't people that don't have money that don't take good care of their pets, but we have to be judicious about who they go to, because they're helpless once they get out there. The other thing that he can help us with is that rental owners have no rights or no way in this city to take action against a tenant that does not take care of their pet. Under rent control, you cannot evict them. What are you going to do? Have them arrested for animal cruelty? So one of the reasons that we don't rent people with pets is we don't have any control over how they're cared for. So that's something very, very important that he could focus on and help us. And also the abandonment issue, allowing us to get a deposit, that if someone abandons the animal, they abandon that deposit, and that deposit can be used to care for the animal after they've left it there, and the owner of the property has to take responsibility for the animal after that. And there are a lot of things, there are a lot of aspects of this. It sounds wonderful. We just put them out there and everybody's going to love them. But anyone that's ever worked in a shelter and in the hard side of animal control knows that it's not that easy.
Thank you. If there's no other comments, I believe we will pass this without objection, and thank you for your willingness to serve in this capacity.
Thank you, council members.
Item number 2.
Item number 2, continued from November 19, 2013. City Attorney Report and Ordinance relative to adding Section 53.74 to the Los Angeles Municipal Code to ban the use of bull hooks or other tools designed to inflict pain to control or train elephants.
And City Attorney is
Yes.
here. If you could give an update on where this ordinance stands.
Council members, this has been returned to you. It would essentially prohibit bull hooks to be used anywhere in the city of Los Angeles on elephants. We think that this serves the direction that we were given by the City Council. It's for this committee to consider whether or not to recommend it for adoption by the City Council.
Okay, and we have 3 speakers from the public. The first speaker is Young Soo Suk.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Myung-Soo Seo, principal at a firm, Sage Strategies. Just here today to register for the record. Want to submit copies of the opposition letter submitted by IATSC, Local 80, Teamsters Local 396, Unite Here, Local 11, Los Angeles County Federation of Labor, and Feld Entertainment. Just wanted to submit this as a matter of record. I understand, and I do not want to belabor this committee over, the various components of the letter. We've spoken to you about this many times, and there's been quite a bit of record. But I felt compelled today just to be here today, just to remind you about the opposition and the main reason for those opposition, and particularly the organization I'm representing today, IATSC. What was at stake at Staples Center because of the uniqueness of the circus shows and the amount of shows that gets done in LA, we are going to lose after 3 years of stay, 40,000 hours of work each summer, each June, within 2 weeks of that time, which is slowest time for the Staples Center workers, and not all the sort of ramification result of this act and vote is documented in those letters. I hope you will take a look at it. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shri Shankar. To be followed by Catherine Doyle.
Hello, Shri Shankar. I just first of all want to thank the PAW Committee for moving this ordinance forward, and I'm really excited for it to get to the mayor's desk to be signed into law. I just wanted to bring up, and it's a wonderful first step in protecting these majestic, amazing animals, the elephants, from the mistreatment that they experience, particularly by the bullhook, which I consider as a weapon. I saw the ordinance language, and I just wondered if you would look at the issue of not just the use of the bullhook, but possession of it, because it may be very difficult to enforce, having to keep your eye on them, the whole time that they're in town to make sure they're not using that bullhook either behind the scenes or anywhere else while they're in the city. So, and on top of that, just the mere sight of the bullhook, it does cause fear and anxiety, with the elephant. So, hoping you'll consider maybe adding some language that covers that issue. That's it. And again, thank you for getting this through the council.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Catherine Doyle with the Performing Animal Welfare Society, and just basically like to reiterate our support for the bullhook ban. Of course, thank you for moving this along. I also second what Shri was saying about language and about the importance of having possession of the bullhook banned and not just use of it, because I do think it would put a burden on the city, a burden of proof to show that it was used. But also a bullhook, we have at our sanctuary in Northern California, we have 11 elephants, and a bullhook is not allowed on the premises at all, because elephants, even after years and years of not having been handled with a bullhook, the very sight of one will actually cause them, it'll cause a reaction. It will cause fear. And because that's how elephants are controlled with bull hooks, it's through the fear of physical punishment. So again, I think it's important that that language be included because, like I said, the very presence of the bull hook and the elephant, especially being able to see that bull hook, actually does imply that, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you're going to be hurt. So thank you for considering that. Thanks.
Well, I'd ask the city attorney if you see any difficult legal implications in making that change.
I would want to take this back so that we could study that kind of a change. We're comfortable with essentially criminalizing the use of a bullhook on an elephant. And it's the use because of the fact that that is cruel to an elephant that we're comfortable with it, and we think that the law would support that. I'm concerned about criminalizing an object. It's much like criminalizing a gun because we're aware of the kind of damage that the use of a gun can have. And so I have my concerns. I would like to do some further research to see what effect, if any, and whether we can justifiably insert possession into this kind of an ordinance. Because you would be criminalizing a bullhook anywhere in the city of Los Angeles, any ownership of a bullhook.
I don't know if there'd be other implications beyond obviously just the thought that if you had a bullhook but you weren't using it and you were in the vicinity of a circus, obviously it would have an impact. If you had one in your home that was, somehow came into your possession and, someone ran across it and arrested you for possessing it in a drawer somewhere, what that implication would be as well.
These are some of the concerns. We recognize the effect of a bullhook on an elephant, but by the same token, criminalizing the possession or ownership of a bullhook in the city, I think does raise a lot of issues that we would like to look into.
I mean, this suggestion is kind of a surprise to me, so I don't know whether we should delay this for study or just move it forward. Colleagues, any feelings on that one way or the other?
I would like to comment, Mr. Chair.
Sure.
I feel that the presence of a bullhook is also a form of cruelty. The presence or possession, use is certainly the act of violence against an animal is certainly an issue. But just like guns aren't allowed to be in our schools, certainly not the use of them or the possession or the presence of them. Similarly, I think bullhooks pose a threat just by having their presence or having a trainer possessing them because of the conditioning that elephants have had. So perhaps I would support the report back, but not holding this up. And with a look at adding the prohibition of possession, and perhaps not taking a look at what level of action would be taken against just the possession or presence of one as opposed to actual use. I would love to take a look at what that might be.
If I might, I would suggest, and I understand what's being suggested, but I would suggest also, again, without having looked into this carefully, that the term use of a bullhook, which is already in the ordinance, may be sufficient that a trainer would not have to strike an elephant, but simply have the bullhook there and use it to control the elephant, which is, I think, the concern that was raised, may be enough. In other words, the language that is now in the ordinance may be enough to prevent a trainer from holding the bullhook in the presence of an elephant and using it not by striking, but simply using it as a means of control.
So use could be interpreted as even holding it. Could also be a form of using one.
I believe so. If you are using it in the sense that you are holding it in the presence of an elephant, again, with the intent that you don't need to hit the elephant with it, you know the effect that this bullhook will have within the vision of the elephant.
Provided that would be the interpretation of the ordinance, then I would accept something like that. But I would love it if you would report back on that.
As a separate matter, we can look into the idea of possession, and but again, the time period may be longer than it would take for this ordinance to be referred to the City Council and to be adopted.
Maybe one thing you could look at that would sort of be an in-between would be, rather than just the interpretation, because I don't know that it would have been obvious to me that we clarify more the fact that if they have a bullhook behind the scenes and they wave it around, don't whack an elephant with it, that's still an illegal use. So you can't possess it and use it in any way for training within the boundaries of the City of Los Angeles.
Well, that would be, I think, that would come under use. What I could do is check with some members of the Criminal Prosecution Division, both in my office and in the DA's office, and see how they would interpret this.
Yeah,
it's an informal.
See if there's a way to add clearer language for this particular circumstance, and that may essentially resolve it. Because I think our concern is not the broad possession that someone might have it in a garage somewhere. It's that they be used even in a less physical way,
right.
In the continuing training and guidance of elephants.
But once again, the easy word that we both fall into is that it could be used. And so that's why I'm thinking that the language that prevents the use of the bullhook may not necessarily, may be way broader than use as in striking, because it's commonly understood that the bullhook does not have to be used by striking in order to be effectively used.
Yeah, I think probably what's missing is if someone possessed a bullhook at a circus, even if they weren't whacking the elephant, I think it would be obvious that were the use. If they had it behind the scenes and were showing it to an elephant, just to remind them rather than whacking them behind the scenes, which we know they also do, I think that would be the piece that might not be so clear by the definition. So if we could look at that one element so we can get that across as well, that might be what resolves it. So if you could look at all that.
And Mr. Chair, just a couple of other things. The amending motion from October 23rd said effectuate phase in the ban within 3 years. The language that you are providing says the ordinance will become operative 36 months after its effective date or January 1st, 2017, which is later. I would just want to make sure that the option would remain to effectuate the phase-in within the 3 years, should that become a possibility, and not set the date in stone as January 1st, 2017.
Okay. I think the reason I believe that it was written the way it was is that I believe that the council action was that it be operational in 3 years.
The motion says within 3 years, but maybe we're just arguing over syntax. But that to me means it could be sooner, or leaving the room for that to be a possibility.
Except the way it's written now, it would in fact be effective January 1st, or actually a little bit later. Maybe the easiest thing to do is to just strike whichever is later, and then just have it effective on a date certain. And that would in fact be within 3 years, considering that it's now January of 2014. By the time this goes to council, gets signed, and becomes effective, it'll probably be sometime in March or maybe even April.
And lastly, are we satisfied that all of the language, the description of a bullhook, that there aren't any loopholes, that an implement that would be some sort of reinterpretation of a bullhook but look very different would not come into use?
I've looked at some of the literature, and I've heard from some of the proponents, and I have not heard that, and I've not seen that as an issue.
And the language is pretty broad in terms of other implements without naming them.
Yes.
Thank you.
So,
do you wish to modify the whichever is later language in the draft ordinance before you?
And the other choice would be what if we didn't phrase it that way?
If that language got struck, then January 1st would be the operative date, which would be within 3 years, and it wouldn't be
So January 1st, 2017.
2017.
Yeah, I think the intention wasn't that circuses and other entities could try and squeeze one in at an earlier time than they had planned, because we now have progressed a couple months. So
Right.
I think January 1st, 2017 would be certainly within the intention.
Okay. And so I will have a revised version into the city clerk before it gets to the city council.
Now, to answer our questions, would you prefer to come back to committee, or do you think you can do this timely before it goes to council? How would...
For those questions, my guess is I would need to come back to committee. My guess is that it would take longer than a matter of a week or two.
Okay, so why don't we do that then, continue this item. How long do you think you need?
Say 30 days. I will be able to communicate with your staff if I need anything more than that.
Okay, and obviously if you can do it less and we have a meeting scheduled, communicate that too.
Right.
But otherwise, let's ask this be continued for approximately 30 days to get the answers to those questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Move on to item number 3.
Item number 3, CEO and Department of Animal Services reports relative to proposed contract with the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals to provide spay and neuter services at the South Los Angeles Animal Care Center.
Good afternoon, council members. Janice Chang Yu, Office of the CAO. Our office recommends approval of the contracting request between Animal Services and the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals to provide animal spay and neuter surgeries at the South Los Angeles Animal Care Center Spay and Neuter Clinic. The term of the contract is for 3 years with an option to extend the contract for 3 additional years. The proposed contract amount is not to exceed $500,000 per year. And in addition to spay and neuter services, the proposed contractor would provide free vaccine events in South Los Angeles parks 2 to 3 times per year to target animals most at risk of being surrendered to the care center. And will also offer free visual exams, rabies, and distemper vaccinations for cats and dogs, free spay and neuter appointments, collars, leashes, and flea and tick medications, in addition to general pet care informational handouts and issuance of dog licenses. In addition to the contract with Animal Services to provide the spay and neuter services, the proposed contract also includes a license agreement with the General Services Department for ASPCA to use the facility without charge. In consideration of the no-cost use of the facility, the ASPCA will provide discounted services to the department for spay and neuter surgeries that are provided to shelter animals at a discount of 50%. And if there's anything additional, the department can provide it.
Any reason, or what are the reasons that this isn't proposed to be done with city workers in-house?
Can you repeat the question? John Chavez with the Department of Animal Services.
Why are we doing this with city workers in-house?
Why aren't we doing it? We don't have enough staff to do that. We did go through the Section 1022 process with the Personnel Department, the CAO's office. We just don't have enough people, Councilman. We've had to contract this out in the past as well. It's just insufficient staffing.
And this is paid for through the Animal Sterilization Fund?
That's correct.
How's that work?
Well, the funds that we get from the Animal Sterilization Fund to go into the fund come from the license sales. So we set aside some money from the license sales that goes into the fund. We would set aside $500,000 with the ASPCA, put that under contract, and then we'd reimburse them for their surgeries.
And how do we protect this fund to make sure it's not swept in the budget process? Or could that happen?
Yes, it can happen. I mean, we didn't get enough. in prior years, we had about $1.1 million general fund subsidy. There is a subsidy that goes into this particular account. This year, instead of getting about $1.1 million, we got $710 million. There's always the potential that could be swept. I mean, we certainly need this money. We use it in addition to putting this funding under contract. We use it to pay for other vets under contract with the department to do vaccinations as part of the city's voucher program.
So hopefully we can defend it from being swept in the current budget year.
Yes, we absolutely would love that, especially since spay and neuter is key to getting us to no kill. So that's something that's very, very important to us.
But if we have this contract, could it be swept, or would we not then be violating our contractual obligation?
I don't believe the money that's under contract would be swept, but...
So the contract says not to exceed $500,000, so that would be in consideration of the funding available in the budget. And to clarify, the funds that are generated from the license sales, those funds stay in the sterilization fund and cannot be swept to the general fund. It's only the determination of the subsidy from the general fund that is decided through the annual budget process.
Okay. Other questions? Comments? If not, I'd move this item without objection.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 5.
Item number 5, CAO report relative to review of departmental requests for authority to employ in substitute positions for fiscal year 2013-14.
Good afternoon. Jenny Mock with the CAO. At its last meeting, the committee asked the CAO to report back on the criteria used to evaluate departmental requests for substitute positions. Substitute positions are essentially positions for which financing is not provided in the budget prior to fiscal year 13-14. The filling of substitute positions was primarily authorized by the CAO. However, as part of the fiscal year 13-14 budget process, the council adopted a policy wherein all substitute positions other than for layoff avoidance shall require council approval effective July 1st of 2013. Since then, the CAO has received 18 departmental requests for substitute positions. The type and status of each request is shown in a chart on page 2 of the report provided before you. In general, the purpose of substitute positions is to enable a department to resolve a temporary staffing problem, such as providing replacements for persons on extensive sick leave, to meet peak workload situations, to reduce a backlog in workload, to correct classification problems, as well as to provide recruitment opportunities and for layoff avoidance. In addition to this, the CAO also considers the length of time the substitute position is requested to be filled, the employment level of the department, the availability of funds, and the holding of a regular position vacant to finance the substitute position. While these criteria guide the recommendation of the CAO, it is important to note that each request is reviewed and determined on a case-by-case basis based on the circumstances of the request. At this time, 3 requests for substitute positions are pending but was subsequently approved by this committee for review and subsequent council action. In addition, there are 3 requests currently pending CAO review. Of these 3, 2 will require council action and the remaining is for layoff avoidance.
Now, one of the questions I think we asked that didn't get answered in this report is if the money is present and the general manager wants such a substitute authority, why would the CAO object to it?
I think the request that you were referring to is probably the planning department, which I think at the time that request was made, the request was for about 8 months. Generally, with substitute positions at the AGM level, we're talking about a salary of about $12,000 or so a month, so it can be potentially very costly for a department to fill 2 AGM positions at that level. The planning request has subsequently been approved by council, but...
It's more of a general question. If the money's there and the general manager feels there's a need, then why do we object to it?
Drawing a blank. Jody Oxheimer with the CAO. Probably for the reason that the council wants to review and approve
such requests. I think you want to assure yourself that all of the requirements are being met and that there are sufficient funds and the circumstances are appropriate. So we would make a recommendation accordingly, and the council would act accordingly. Presumably, if the general manager was making the request and it was not to be questioned, then the council wouldn't want to see it either. So there
Well, it's one thing to be questioned, it's another to actually recommend disapproval.
Right.
Obviously, I assume it's for a fiscal purpose, but one would hope we allow the general managers to manage when the money's there. So I guess that's probably as good a guess as any. Are there any types of extensive leave that are ineligible for approval?
So an extensive leave is subject to a little bit of interpretation, but the idea, I think, is if a department can't manage the work with their existing staff because somebody's on leave, then they would ask for a substitute position. And again, it's in the context of any number of considerations, including the staff that are available and funding that's available and the criteria that Jenny, or the sort of factors that Jenny mentioned earlier.
So there's nothing that's automatically ineligible?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
How many fiscal requests are there this fiscal year compared to last fiscal year?
So last fiscal year's just a preliminary review shows that we received about 14 requests.
And this year?
18 so far.
Last year. Okay. And what exactly is the difference between substitute authority and in lieu authority?
So a substitute authority is basically an additional position. And in lieu authority would be where a position is makes less than an existing vacant position is being employed directly in lieu of that authority. Personnel department is consulted to make sure that the work is similar from a classification perspective. It may be that you hire a management assistant in lieu of a management analyst so that you use it for training purposes. But there's generally a direct correlation between the vacant position and the position that's being filled in lieu of it.
And the substitute authority?
Substitute is just an unfunded extra position. And in recent years, I couldn't really tell you how many, generally we look to the departments to hold another position vacant for a couple of reasons. One is to make sure that they can afford the unfunded position, but also to make sure that they don't exceed their the number of positions authorized by the mayor and council.
Any particular reason why one or the other is more desirable for layoff avoidance?
I don't know. Right. So, for example, if you are in a position of laying somebody off with a salary of $75,000, but your only vacant position is at $60,000 a year, you couldn't use an in lieu authority, so you would activate a substitute to avoid having the person laid off.
Gotcha. Okay. Any other questions, colleagues, comments? If not, we'll receive and file that report without objection.
Thank you.
And that is our last item, so we are adjourned.